good evening, depending on where you are tuning in from. This is The Awesome Journey, and I am your host, Kelly Steinica, along with my co host in care, Christy Howard. She's usually beneath me, so that was a little strange for me. And Hey, I normally do a spiel at the beginning, and I haven't done our new intro for 2024. It is almost finished because I got tired of saying the same thing week after week, even though it's important to start the show with what it's about. But I wanted to just get back to the basics. The awesome journey really applies to all of us that have the privilege of waking up on this side of the dirt every day. Doesn't always feel good, it's not always fun, and sometimes it's just downright shitty, but the journey is awesome nonetheless. And when we support one another and are there for one another, it makes it all the better. And we really just wanted to spend an hour a week bringing some motivation, inspiration, and hope into the world, having real conversation with real people about real things that matter. And where we have been able to go with this, we're so beyond blessed of who we get to meet, who we get to talk to every week. And I will continue to say it every week because we crushed it this week. And we're super pumped about our guest today. Mr. Tom Smith and Dan Murphy, who are the hosts of, the host of Gold Shield podcast. And they are both worked NYPD. So they were able to wear the coveted Gold Shield for detective of the New York Police Department. And they do what we do, and which is kind of cool that we get to flip the script on them today. Their podcast, they highlight their guests and then they don't talk about themselves. So today we get to highlight them and talk about them. And I do want to start by saying thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate you for not just what you've done, but for your service. And just God bless you both for what you continue to do, bringing these, I think, very important topics, because you all need to check out their podcast. I still have a list that I'm going back to watch. And as I always say, we will include all the links that we talk about today to the podcast and to their social media in the comments, as well as in the post promos. So sit back, get a cup of coffee, cup of tea, or an adult beverage, depending on what time zone you're in. I'm not promoting day drinking during the week.
Why?
I know. Well, it's up to you. It's not my jam. But before we turn it over to our very special guest, who we're super pumped to have with us today, I will turn it over to my co-host in care, Christy Howard.
Well, there's not much to say. First of all, they were New York cops, lived in New York, and that is a shit show. And I'm glad that they're retired right now. So yes, their podcast, as I mentioned, we have mentioned on when we've promoted them. You'll see some of our guests, and we'll see some of their guests. We're very like-minded of the people that we want to showcase and what they do, because you don't find it in the media. In the media, we know how the media can be. So we're going to find out who Dan and Tom are, and then we're going to find out why Dan and Tom does what they do. Was that Christianese or was that English?
Yes, it was. That was our first dose.
There you go. So because we've spoken to Tom lengthily, we're going to throw Dan into the spotlight, and you can start off. Tell us about how you got to become a cop. I know that you have military background, so let's go for it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I don't have military background.
My bad.
My father was a Marine.
She's the deep diver, so my bad.
Some guy named Dan Murphy has a great military background, and I can't steal that honor. So, yeah. No, I grew up in New York City, Western Queens, Long Island City, Sunnyside area, and blue collar area. And my dad was an electrical worker for the Transit Authority. My mother was a secretary. The kind of jobs you get with a high school diploma. And most of my neighborhood, that's what they did. There was a few people that were professional career people, but for the most part, it was, civil service jobs or union jobs and stuff like that. And I was raised with that attitude, get a steady job, get a good paycheck, get benefits, and, and do your best. That's kind of what the attitude was. I didn't know I wanted to become a cop at all. I was in Queens College, commuting to school and working part-time jobs and stuff. And I ended up communications major at first. Believe it or not, with this New York accent, I thought I was going to go into radio, which is a stretch. But I've always known I've had a face for radio, so I figured that's a perfect fit, right? You got a head the size of a beach ball, go into radio. So
I love it.
Yeah, you have to be true. What happened was, I was on a radio station at college. I was having fun with it. I found out it's really not a career. There really isn't a lot of money, and the very small sliver of people make any kind of a living out of it. Most people just, you bounce around, you don't barely work. It wasn't for me. I didn't
Yeah.
know what I was going to do, and then all of a sudden, we have a family barbecue, and my uncle, who I respected immensely, and who, in many ways, was my second father. He was in the NYPD for a long time, his entire working career, basically 38 or 39 years.
God
And he
bless.
worked at headquarters. He knew a lot of people, but he just mentioned to me, why don't you take the police test? I remember this is kind of after my second year in college and kind of floundering. I said, really? He said, yeah, they're giving a test in a couple of months and you might like it. They'll pay for to help you finish college. There's all kinds of benefits to it. And I thought about it. I said, I really didn't want to go into an office job and sit there all day long and be in an office environment. To me, I wanted some more excitement out of life. And I didn't necessarily, I will admit, want to swing a hammer in 25-degree temperatures outside as a construction worker for the rest of my life. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I ended up studying and took the test. And I, to my surprise, did very well. And I got hired within a year and I loved it. I loved it. It was a lot of guys in my neighborhood getting hired because it was big hiring. Because in the late 70s, the NYPD had a freeze. They laid cops off. Then they started hiring again in the late 70s, and continuously for many years they were doing back-to-back academy classes of 1,500 to 2,000. And I managed to get in one in February of 1984. So coming up next weekend will be my 40th anniversary from the day that I swore in.
Wow.
I swore in when I was 4 years old.
Yeah,
And,
I was gonna say.
I was 21, and it was a life-changing event. I loved it. I loved the camaraderie. I loved the excitement. It was a lot
So
to learn.
were you in the boroughs or were you in the city?
Oh, I lived in the borough. I lived in Queens.
Right, but did you work in the city or did you?
I
when you
worked
started-
initially. I started out in Brooklyn North, in
Okay.
Williamsburg, Bushwick, Greenpoint, areas that now are trendy, right?
Mhm.
But back
Yeah.
then were, not Greenpoint, but Williamsburg and Bushwick had a lot of problems, had a lot of heroin, a lot of issues. And I came out on the job and I lived literally like 5 miles away as the crow flies from these areas, but it was a different world. And I learned from really, really good people. And I fell into the lifestyle and I loved it.
Yeah, I lived in New York in 1990 to 1994.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, well, you were there when we had the luxury of realizing how bad it was and having a new mayor come in who took the gloves off and let us take the city back, and that's what we did.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
they cleaned up after I left.
Yeah.
Going down to the ABCs, it's like, no, but I did.
Mm.
You just,
Oh. And it's a shame because I'm blessed that I had a sister company that was in the city, and I got to go at least once a month back probably now 7 years ago, and stay in Chelsea, which that was a bummer. But I felt safe to walk around by myself. I would walk to my office or walk home from a restaurant or a bar wherever I was with coworkers or clients. And everyone that I know they're like, girl, you wouldn't be doing that now. And I'm like, it's a shame because it was, and I'll never forget the first time you see New York City in person. It's overwhelming because it's so like, holy crap, I can't even take that all in. And
it's
just,
only 7 miles long.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and Hoboken freaked me out too because I did have friends at Hoboken PD, and then being 1 mile square with 1 million people and the stuff that they have, they're like, oh, when they have riots or things going awry, that when the cops show up, that people are throwing like microwaves and air conditioners out their 10th story building, and you just can't wrap your brain around it. But the love that every officer that I certainly knew in New York and even here locally, and the ones that I've known personally, they all cared and they knew everybody in their community because there wasn't anywhere we went that people weren't saying hi, or they knew all the gangs, they knew everything. And it's a shame what's happened today. And I don't want to get going down that path yet because I I do want to get to the rest of.
Yeah, we want to bring on Tom to see how. So anyway,
Yeah.
so Dan, you got into the police department, and you stayed there for how many years?
20 years. I moved around quite a bit. I was very fortunate. I had a chance to do a lot of different things, and we can get into some of that later. But I spent the bulk of my career either as detective or detective supervisor, which both roles I really enjoyed. I like the whodunits. I like the manhunts. I like all that stuff. And
Well, what department were you? I mean,
what area? Well,
yeah,
I could list them off all day long, but I worked in warrant squad, felony fugitive squad. I worked in narcotics in Brooklyn. I worked in organized crime investigation, which was a task force with the DEA at the time. And that took me overseas. I had a chance to go do some work overseas, which was interesting. Then I went to the major case squad, which was kidnappings for ransom and bank robberies and shootings of police officers, and
everything that we see on Law and Order, right?
Yeah, well, there is a Law and Order show about the major case squad. It's called Criminal Intent, and it's television Hollywoodized, but nonetheless, the basic thing is there. And then I went to I got promoted to sergeant, and then back to uniform for the first time in almost 10 years, and it was to the 46th precinct in the Bronx, the 4-6. Shout out to anybody who's ever worked in a 4-6 or stopped in. We call it the Alamo, with good reason. 1.1 square miles of the most dangerous territory in America at the time, and a great place to learn. Great cops, great detectives, handling stuff that most cops around the country I talk to can't conceive of, the volume or the savagery and the brutality and the violence and the child abuse and the drugs and all of it. From there, continuing on as a sergeant had to do my time in internal affairs, which at the time was necessary to move back to detectives. Worked in a police impersonation and robbery squad, had great opportunities and experiences there. Had a chance to go after these crews that were impersonating cops, robbing people, robbing drug spots. Yeah, oh yeah. We had a guy who killed a couple of cops in Puerto Rico try to jump out a window of a housing project on us one night rather than go to prison. I mean, crazy stuff. New York was out of control. And then I had a chance to go on to the Bronx Gang Squad. That's where Tom and I met. And that was, life-changing in many ways, and got to do some.
Because you met Tom.
Because I met Tom, honestly, because here we are, 20-something, 25, 28 years later.
It was a bromance at first sight.
Bromance at first sight, yeah. He asked me out, I played hard to get.
Yeah. You didn't have a choice that day.
Yeah. So then
I
went from there to a unit called TARU, Technical Assistance Response Unit, which is where I was on 9/11. Phenomenal people there, very interesting work, and then ended up in the terrorism task force with Tom again. Retired out of there. So I had an amazing run. Very, very blessed.
Well, I want to bring Tom in to share his story, but of course we're going to go into the 9/11 because of the podcast we were talking about on yours and your podcast. Because all four of us are like-minded about that, and for the fact that you all were there, and I had 7 friends die, and then I had one of the terrorist cells living next door to me in Southern California. But here's Tom. I'm not cutting you off. You just know that I just interrupt and try to keep it flowing.
Yeah. Keeps it going, keeps it fresh.
Yeah, I do.
Absolutely.
Okay, Tom, tell us about you.
Well,
and how did we even connect? I think I found you through somebody.
We
did too. I think.
Yeah, we did. On LinkedIn, someone introduced us on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And then here we are.
Yeah.
Thankfully. Unlike Dan, I grew up in the law enforcement world. My dad was a retired NYPD detective of 26 years through the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s when New York was a absolute another world. So I grew up in that atmosphere and wanting to be my dad. That's the only thing I wanted to do. Growing up, through high school, through everything, was to join the NYPD and to be a detective. That was my absolute goal. And, I'm fortunate because a lot of times you don't get to live out your dream. You don't get to reach that goal for a number of reasons. And I was privileged enough and happy enough to have accomplished that. I got on the job in 1990. As Dan said, we went through some hiring freezes. I actually took the test in 1987 and had to wait 3 years because of just budget stuff and us not getting hired, them not hiring cops at the time. So I finally got on in 1990 and ended up in the west side of Harlem and Washington Heights 30 precinct, which, like Dan said, at that time, the city was out of control and we had 1 square mile of just drugs, shootings, homicides. That's what that precinct was. And you learned really, really quick how to be a cop. You had no choice. You had to survive, and luckily we had, very experienced people there that you got to learn from, and you watched and you listened and you just paid attention and learned the job really quick, and you learned it the right way. And was fortunate enough to I was only in uniform for about 3 years, and then I got assigned to the anti-crime unit, which was a plainclothes unit in the precinct that handled all the robbery patterns and the gun runs and all that, which was a incredible place to work. Besides the fact one of my best friends was my sergeant. So that made it, that was great. And then went to narcotics in the Bronx, where I had maybe the best time on the job. That was the most fun. JTTF was a different animal. We'll get to that, but just job wise, that was the best place in the world to work. I had,
wow. That's a hard concept to say. I'm having a fun time when the city's a shit show.
Yep, because we were narcotics at the time. We were so busy, and I had a phenomenal team. The team I was on, we did large scale cases, we did wires, we got countless search warrants, and I had a fun time doing the search warrants because I was the RAM guy. So I was the first one in the door, which my wife didn't love too much, but I did. But it was just the work that we were doing, and you learned really at that point how to be a detective. You had to rely on going out there and following people and doing backgrounds and who was hooked up with who. So that's where you kind of got your teeth going with being a detective. And Dan shaking his head, and he was in narcotics and the same thing. That's where you learn.
Did you guys deal with the Westies and the mafia?
Not the Westies, but I dealt with some mafia. I grew up around them, some of them, but I also dealt with a few in my professional career. Not too extensively. They got their tentacles into a lot of different things. I did work in organized crime, but again, my role there was with Southeast Asian heroin importation and stuff. But, Tom talks about narcotics. He's right. You say you have fun. Fun for us is getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and at 6 o'clock putting an 80-pound ram through some knucklehead's door who thinks he's immune from prosecution. He thinks he can destroy a neighborhood with his heroin and his crack, and he thinks he's a tough guy. And all of a sudden, 8 of us go through the door and we slam his face on the ground, lock him up, take his guns, take his money, voucher it all for evidence, and put him in prison. That's fun for us.
But it's changed a lot now.
Oh,
yeah.
It's ridiculous. And I would say even, fun, because a lot of people can misinterpret that, because you guys were making a difference in your community. Right. And what a gift. I mean, to everyone, to have people like you who are like, I can't wait to get up and ram this piece of crap's door down and throw it away and throw away the key. A true gift. So, for people who want to say, oh, you have fun, kicking people around, you got to consider who they are and where they're going after. They're people who are killing other people and doing bad stuff. So look at that. Because I think everybody, and we said this a little bit beforehand, people are too easily offended. And it's just like, stop. Like, I'm blessed that you guys were out there and doing what you did. And really wish there was more. Because I'm not going to lie, I have a lot of police officer friends here in Phoenix, and a lot of them have retired since 2020 because there's been a mass exodus here. And I'm not going to lie, it scares me that they're leaving because they're not coming on board. Like they can't pay people or bonus high enough to get people to come on board. I want people who are excited to get up at 4 a.m. to bust down a door, and not people who are going, what pronoun am I going to use when we get to their house? Like, I don't care. So, that's just kind of
got the let's unfund the cops. But hey, we need you when we need you, but we're going to unfund you and we hate you.
Right.
Right.
And I do
And
want to
that's what the fun part was. You know, you waited a lifetime. Like for me, you know, I waited a lifetime to get that job. You know, and I remember I would do when I was on patrol, I did 4 to 12s, and you'd get into the precinct at 1 o'clock in the afternoon to see what was going on, you know, who was there, who made an arrest. And you were just excited about doing your job because Dan and I actually saw the change, him before me, of the city, you know, of just dealing with 2,500 to 3,000 homicides a year and not really being able to do your job. And then in 1994, as Dan had mentioned, everything changed. And Bratton came in, and Giuliani came in, and Adamone and Timoney and all that whole crew, Maples.
Jack Maple.
And we were allowed to do our job again. So when you get stifled in doing it, and then, hey, go get it, go clean the city up, that's what made it fun. And the fun part, like you were saying, Kelly, you know, in neighborhoods and narcotics, there were narcotics crews that controlled neighborhoods. People couldn't walk around. People couldn't go to the store. So when we would come in and take a crew down, the neighborhood council would come to the precinct or our office thanking us for getting their neighborhood back. You know, so that's what made it all worthwhile when you had the good citizens of a neighborhood thanking you for taking down a crew and doing 7 search warrants in a neighborhood in one shot. You know, that's what made it fun. That was the fun part.
Yeah. Yeah, Tom's absolutely right. And, you know, these crews and gangs as well, organized gangs, whether they be a drug gang or a high profile gang like the Bloods or the Crips or something, they come into a neighborhood, they rule the neighborhood. You better wear their color. You better not wear somebody else's color of clothing, anything. You better speak the way they want you to. You better do this. You better do that. They control what goes on. And they do so at the terror of people trying to raise small families, people trying to raise 12, 13, 14-year-old kids who are being drawn into that. We used to see it, and it used to really be heartbreaking to see a kid who doesn't want to do that and wants to go to school, and he can't even walk from his home to school without getting robbed, without getting beaten up, made fun of. He can't wear a new jacket he gets for Christmas. They'll take it. I mean, these kind of things happen, and this is what doesn't make the paper, but this is the kind of stuff we enjoyed being an answer to. We enjoyed standing up for these people. You know, like, it's not just a paycheck. It was more than that to us. It was, we're in a position where we can help right or wrong and take somebody and turn them from victim into a normal person again. And that's something that people don't understand. You put down cops, you think we're too aggressive. You know, you have to be aggressive with really, really tough, hard career criminals. These are not nice people.
Right.
These are people.
Well, and it goes back that there are some bad cops out there.
Oh, yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
Kelly was married to one.
Yeah.
But there are people who are passionate about it, like you all. And I know a lot of them that's saying, hey, this is not how you're supposed to treat people. This is not how you're supposed to have your environment. Get this crap out of here. And I say this about pretty much every person we have on. We bring people on to let people know it's just not in the TV shows. It's just not in the movies. This is real shit. These are people that actually have gone out and seen the terror, the bad, ugly people, and have fought them for us. I mean, I lived in New York, and I moved in 90. Yeah, I moved out going into 94. And I remember coming back to New York, and I'm just like, whoa, you could go down the meat district. I mean, it was completely changed. It was nothing like how I lived it. And I lived 6 blocks away from Harlem's on the east side. But, you know, when you look at it now, it's reverted back to the shit show.
It's a shame. And
it's a shame.
I just think to, you know, reiterate a couple of things that y'all been saying that made me think about this. You know, yes, my ex was a bad seed. But bad seeds are everywhere. I don't care what industry you work in, what profession you work in, there's bad people everywhere. So, and I'm not of the school that says one bad apple spoils the whole barrel, because that's not true. You guys, to me, are what, you know, I'm blessed that that's what we grew up with, is people who wore the badge were proud of it. It was an honor and a privilege to serve their community and to protect them. And and the other thing I want to say is, if until you've been that person that calls 911 screaming, thinking, "Oh my God, these seconds taking the police officers to get here is taking forever." And when they pull into your house and surround it and are there for you, you don't know how much you need them or need them in your life or their protection. You don't need a counselor that's going to come to a domestic violence situation, because those and this is my understanding, and I'll let you guys speak on this if you wish. Domestic violence calls are one of the most dangerous calls to go on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's not something you go in and say, "Hey, we're going to split you two up and have a calm conversation and give one of you a teddy bear so you feel better." Um, it's usually where and I've had friends who've gone to domestic violence calls and were shot.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
so it's just there's so much that people don't really understand what is behind the badge and what needs to be behind the badge. Guess what? You need people to be aggressive, because when you're in the need of having your life saved, or you think you're in that position, I'm not sitting there going, "God, he's really aggressive." I don't
Mhm.
want him hesitating, or her. I want them running into it to save me. And that's how
Mhm.
everybody feels. And it's a shame that a layer of that has been removed in today's society.
You mentioned domestics, and domestics truly are. There's a couple things you learn as a young cop. They teach you in the academy, but then you learn it on your own. One is that car stops can result in your death in a second. You can
Mhm.
stop the car and you can get shot. You can get run over in a second. Very dangerous. And they teach us ways to do them right. And domestics, absolutely. Emotions run high. Family dynamics that you have no idea about are at play. You don't know what you're walking into, and you're walking into somebody's home where they
Yeah.
have weapons potentially anywhere, where they can get incredibly upset that you're in their home. All
Yeah.
kinds of things happen. There's so many dynamics. And when I think of domestics as one specific one, and I worked in the 30th precinct in West Harlem several years before Tom did, and it was equally bad. I went in working on a foot post by myself on Broadway one night right before Christmas. I'll never forget it. And a call comes in for a family domestic, going on inside apartment, fourth floor, fifth floor of this building right on Broadway. So I pick it up on the radio. Yeah, I'll go. And they're like, "Oh, stay by, wait for a car to come. They don't want you to go in alone." I said, "Yeah, whatever." So I walked up the stairs. I'm going up there and I'm hearing yelling. And I get up, I get to the door. The door is somewhat open. I push the door open, and there is a guy standing over a 15-year-old girl with a machine gun,
Oh, sweet
and
Jesus.
it's her father, and he's trying to kill her. He's a
Oh,
Cuban Freedom Flotilla guy. When
oh,
Carter took in those people in the late 70s from Cuba, Castro emptied out the prisons of the worst, and he
yeah.
put them on flotillas and pushed them towards Miami. That's what he did. And
Mhm.
Carter took them in. Sure, no problem. And he is not a card carrying, a tattoo wearing. They had these tattoos right there in the web of their hand. And we had a chart in the precinct. If you see this, it means he was convicted of this. This guy was a murderer, convicted murderer, had the tattoo, is standing over his 15-year-old daughter. He is smashed drunk. And it's the only reason he can't load this machine gun properly,
Yeah.
because he wants to kill her, because he came home from drinking and she is sitting on the couch, fully clothed, with a boy from down the hall who's in the same class in school, and they're studying.
Mm.
He decided that was a disgrace to his family, and he's going to kill her. She's screaming for her life. The 15-year-old kid already bolted out of the apartment. Neighbors call 911. I see this. I got a 10-layer Kevlar vest, which won't stop anything that comes out of that guy's gun.
Yeah.
And I got my 6-shot revolver. But what do? I do what we do. I pull a gun. I scream at him, "Police, don't move. Scream, drop the gun, all this kind of stuff." He looks at me. To my absolute delight, he dropped the weapon. I don't know why, because he certainly had me outgunned, but he couldn't load it. He
Mm.
runs out the window that was open onto the fire escape. I go out the fire escape, chase him up to the roof, and catch him. Now, that's a domestic that 5 minutes before that call came in, I'm walking down Broadway and I'm probably thinking, should
Yeah.
I go to McDonald's to get my really bad dinner? Or should I just get a cup of coffee? Or should I write a ticket to this guy that's triple parked? I mean, these are the kind of decisions. And then within seconds, you're thinking, I may have to shoot this guy. He may shoot me. He's trying to kill somebody. That's what it happens. It happens like that. And people have to recognize that when you walk in as an officer to these situations, you don't know what's going on.
That's right.
And you all were both married.
Yes.
Yeah.
During this time. How'd that work out with your wife and your children? Because I know that it's very hard with veterans. I mean, having the spouse and everything, knowing the moment you go and have a call or go to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know what? I had met my wife before I got on the job. So she knew wholeheartedly what she was in for. And being that, like I mentioned before, my dad was a retired detective. Ange had numerous conversations with my mom about, hey, this is how it is. This is what's going to happen. And I was lucky as hell because she knew what it meant. She didn't hesitate in taking on, that lifestyle. And I made a deal with her of, back then we didn't have cell phones. We had pay phones, and I made a deal with her that as much as I could, I would touch base with her during the day. Hey, I'm okay. I'm eating, I'm taking a break, whatever, as much as I could. And that made a difference. And the other part was not keeping anything inside when you got home, to talk it out, because that's when things go wrong. And that's when you run into problems when you keep it inside you, because that only lasts for so long before you explode.
Yeah. And I just, as a spouse, I mean, what a gift that your wife had your mom to talk to, because that was one of my things. And I've talked about this on other shows and with other, ex-spouses of officers, and other first responders, because this does go across, and veterans, is, my situation in particular, he couldn't shut it off when he came home. He was always on duty. And used some of the tactics that he did at work at home with me, which is it's not okay. But I didn't know who to talk to, because there was nothing. So the gift of the mom, and you actually having the awareness, because I think this is so important, especially back then, because mental health wasn't talked about really back then. Maybe a little bit, but it was still kind of like, you pansy if you need that. But you had the awareness, which I do think is unusual, or maybe it is because you came from a family of it, to know I needed to share my feelings with my wife about what is going on, because that is a big core of the demise of relationships and marriages, because not knowing to shut it off. And I'm not saying it's necessarily at their fault. It's part of the job, but also not being part of, it wasn't talked about. But I know as a spouse, for me, I actually started believing, well, God, I guess I am just a shitty wife that's a worthless piece of crap, which is a shame. But I didn't hear anybody else talking about it.
I was lucky. And she had, I have 4 older sisters as well. So she's very close with all my sisters. So cool. That was another outlet for her. And it was something that just you had to do. I just felt I had to do to get it out, and not keep it inside. And it more or less, it kind of involved her. She knew what was going on. And plus, she knows me so well. I mean, we're together 35 years that there's no way I would have came home and tried to hide something. She would have known right away. What's wrong? What happened tonight? Right. And I would try no, nothing. We're fine. And she wouldn't let it go. What's the matter? Sit down, whatever. And, I would tell whatever happened that night that might have been really messed up. She would force it out of me, which was great.
Yeah.
What about you, Dan?
Yeah.
Well, most of my friends, a lot of my friends that I grew up with, and it's just, I guess it's sort of narrowed as I became a cop, either were cops or firefighters and stuff. And so when I met my wife, I'm actually divorced and remarried, but I didn't get divorced while I was on the job. I met my first wife. She came from the neighborhood next to mine. She knew a lot of cops. It was kind of a lifestyle. So I didn't really come home a lot and talk a lot about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was just kind of part of the lifestyle to be accepted. And I didn't really have that outlet. And I really, the culture was really one of don't talk about it. And so I kind of internally, it didn't help me. It really wasn't good.
Right.
wasn't healthy, but I came home and I strived to be normal. I really did want a normal life. And it's very hard when you're working weird
Right.
hours.
Right.
Like when you're a patrol
Plus
cop,
what you're seeing. So
Yeah.
it's like, how do you turn it off?
yeah,
Yeah.
and you know your loved ones, they want normalcy. They want you there on Christmas morning. They want you there, you know, at their birthday parties. They want you there. And
Yeah.
there are times in the job when the job just takes precedence. You know, something happens if you're a detective or a supervisor in a unit that works crazy cases. You know, I'd get a call when I'm exhausted. I got a kidnapping. I got to go in, and I'm exhausted. I worked 60 hours that week. Let's say I got to go in. I got to go drive the hour and a half in and work who knows how long on that case. Could be 24 hours, 36. And then when you come home, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
You're bare. Living with you isn't easy. I mean, there's nothing easy about it. And you're absolutely right, Kelly, to a certain extent. Not that I understand what your ex was going through, but I will say this. It is difficult to turn off
Yeah.
everything and become this really nice, easygoing guy.
Yep.
Especially if you work in a place where all night long people are yelling at you, cursing at you, bleeding on you, dying in front of you. When you go home, you crave normalcy, but you have a calm down period. And Thomas talked about it before.
Yeah.
His thing was turn the TV on, give me an hour or two, sit there, relax, have a snack, calm down.
Yeah.
And then when I moved out of the city and I moved up in Orange County and I was commuting, that was my decompression time. Put on the radio, listen to something, open the window, get some fresh air, and watch the city disappear behind me as I drove away. And that was a part of my decompression. And then when I got home,
yeah, you were aware of that, and I do want to say, and you know, I'm not trying to badmouth my ex in any way, because I do have an understanding and an empathy and compassion for it. His issue was I was still more. He didn't know how to shut off, really interrogating everybody or that sort of thing. Like he would project whatever he was going through, and I learned this, you know, years later through many hours of counseling. And I'm not laughing at that because I think it's funny. It was very necessary. He was projecting all that shit that he did have bottled up out onto me. And I know now it wasn't about me. It was about him. But it is difficult when you're in it, and particularly, you know, again back then, that it wasn't talked about, and there was just no thing. But this is where I do feel that New York in general, particularly New York City and the boroughs and such, your brotherhoods are so much different because of where you worked and what you had to deal with. And you do have a different type of brotherhood. And I remember being around my friends that worked there. They just had a different bond that you really almost can't put into words because it was special.
Oh, 100%. The bond in the NYPD, excuse me, especially with your partner, is unlike anywhere else. I mean, I am still to this day very close with my partner from narcotics and a robbery squad, who taught me how to be a detective. Carlos and I are still close. Dan and I met in 1998, you know, and he was my sergeant. Look at us. He was my sergeant, but we worked almost everything together. You know, he was my partner in the gang unit, even though he was my supervisor. And look at us still today. And even more, I'll tell you something. I still, to this day, talk to my dad's old partner.
That's cool.
From the 60s.
That's
you know,
awesome.
I just actually talked to his son. I talked to Timmy yesterday.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and Joe and I still talk to this day, and they worked together in the 60s and 70s. You know, so that bond is real. It's something to treasure because it's unlike anything around.
Yeah, I mean, partners that I worked with, like Bobby Metcalf, always be a dear friend. John Walsh, we worked together on patrol back in the day, and it was he's a tremendous guy. I could call him up. If I don't talk to him for 6 months, I could call him up and it's like we just saw each other yesterday. Because you went through, you go through stuff together and you have these common experiences and you spend a lot of time in a car. You spend more time with your partner than you do with your spouse. And you go through all this stuff together. You get to know each other really well and you really care about each other deeply. And you have this unspoken, and sometimes it is spoken, I will die for you. I will take a bullet before you do. I want you to go home to your family before I do. And that's kind of something that, not to be overly dramatic or Hallmark cardish,
No.
but it's just true.
It's true.
We watch each other's backs. and we go through a lot. We have a lot of laughter because first of all, everybody lies to you. It's very difficult to go to a job where all day long everybody lies to you, right? Everybody on the street lies to you. Why are you doing 60? I was doing 30. No, you're doing 60. You just
I
moved
only
5 lights. I didn't move a light.
So
Is that
going into that, let's go into 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was in New York during 94 or 93 when the first bombing happened.
February.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember the snow. And then I moved to California, and then 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
And we saw the country come together for a second or so. But what you all did, and again, it goes back to the relationships, the brotherhood, the team. Just, this is our city. We're going to do whatever we can. So can you tell us how that day started for you all?
Yeah, because I was going to say, I just watched that podcast that y'all did this past September 11th last evening, and it was very powerful for so many reasons. And I know that you don't highlight yourselves, but I thought it was
We're here to highlight.
very powerful episode, and particularly because of how you both started your day and where you were when the whole thing started and what your immediate instinct was. So yeah, I think it's an important story to share. So thank you.
I was actually off that day. It was my day off, and I was on my way to the store with my daughter, Nicolette, who was 18 months old at the time. No, actually 9 months old at the time. And all of a sudden I heard on the radio that a plane hit the tower. And the first thing I did was looked out my windshield and went, how'd they screw that up? Because it was a beautiful day. And you couldn't understand how a plane hit that building.
Yeah.
And then I'm pulling into a parking spot to get out of the car to go into the store. And they're interviewing a woman on the radio, and the woman starts screaming hysterically. So I stop and I'm like, all right, why is this woman screaming? And then she says another building hit the other tower. The other plane hit the other tower.
Right.
So I immediately got back in my car, called my partner, Carlos, and went, what's going on? He said, get home. Where's Ange? Because we were very close. He knew Angela is a guidance counselor, and said, where is she? He said, she's in the city. Get her home. Come pick me up. We got to get down there. And that's what we did. I took care of the kids where they needed to be, with my sister-in-law, my wife. I talked to her. She started coming home, and we headed downtown. And it was the weirdest feeling that is hard to describe what was going on. It was sort of in slow motion. You didn't know what to expect. You didn't know what was going on. And part of that day, once you got down there and saw Ground Zero, it looked fake. It looked like a movie set. And you stood there for a second and went, how are we doing this? How are we going to get into there to find anybody? Dan and I.
You pulled into the city after the towers collapsed, or were they still? Okay.
No, they had already come down. By the time I got home, took care of everything, got Carlos, got down there, everything had already collapsed. And like Dan and I mentioned on the show, Dan and I were still, even though we weren't working together, we were still close. We were still very tight. And I remember we talked real quick that day, like, hey, you okay? You're good. Where you going? I'm going down there. Okay, be safe. Talk to you later. And that was it. Then we didn't talk to each other for probably a couple of days because of just the communication problems. But the two things I always remember from that day, and we mentioned it on the show that you mentioned, Kelly, was the smell of burning cement that you will never, ever, I will never get that out of my mind and my head, what that smelled like. And you could smell it from miles away. Mm-hmm. That smell of the burning cement was just drilled into your head. And then the other thing that made it real was watching military fighter jets buzz around Manhattan.
Yeah. That
made it real. That you looked up and saw, all these fighter jets flying around New York City. Made it real. And then you just did what you had to do down there, whatever needed to be done. It didn't matter how many hours you weren't sleeping. You didn't eat. You didn't go home. It didn't matter. time stood still and you just did whatever needed to be done. And you kind of looked up afterwards. You were like, oh my God, I've been down here for 17 hours. Go home, change your clothes, take a shower, get something to eat, come back. And that's what it was for the first, few days there.
Yeah, I echo most of what Tom says. My experience only slightly different in as much as I was supposed to work that day, but it was 9/11 is my birthday, and I was supposed to work that day, but I had taken the day off in advance. And something you learn in the NYPD, if you're in any kind of investigative capacity, if you really want to do something on a given evening and it's really important to you, you should probably take the day off. You've heard of Murphy's Law. I'm the Murphy in Murphy's Law, which means 5 minutes before the end of the shift, something stupid is going to happen, and I'm going to be stuck for a day. So I took the day off. I remember we put the kids on the bus to put them to school. Went down to our local gym. We had plans for lunch, plans for dinner with the kids, all this big day planned. It was beautiful that day. You remember it.
Yeah.
And went into the gym, looked up at the TV, saw some people we know, they were saying hi. And all of a sudden I was like, oh no. Because I remember 93 vividly. February 26, 1993 was my daughter's second birthday. I missed her little girl birthday party because I was at the World Trade Center after that.
I was working the NFL at that time.
Oh yeah. So you remember what it was like in New York that day, and that was just a preview of what we put up with on 9/11. But I remember it, and turned around, went back home, threw some clothes into a bag, and started in. And I had a department vehicle per se, and unmarked, had the little light bulb I put on top, the cherry light, which doesn't really work, but you put it on anyway. And the thing, the cable is coming in front of your face, and you're trying to drive, and I'm listening to the radio, and I hear about the towers falling. And each time it just took my breath away because I couldn't believe it. And I knew immediately, now we were an hour from the city border pretty much, but I was flying, and I knew people that just got killed. I don't know how many. And I knew my team was responding because my team went to anything in the city that was remotely big or of interest. So I'm driving in, my heart's in my butt. I don't know if my brother's okay. My brother was a detective sergeant at the time in the NYPD as well. And I didn't know where he was and if he was okay. I knew so many people, and you're thinking, I hope they're all okay. Like Tom and I touched base quickly, but other than that, I mean, I'm trying to get in touch with my office, trying to get in touch with my squad. Where are they? What are they doing? And I'm making my way in. And as I approach the city, just about every bridge or tunnel into New York City was locked down because the lunatics went on parade and decided to start calling in bomb threats everywhere. Gracie Mansion, the mayor's, City Hall, Gracie Mansion, Madison Square Garden, Holland Tunnel, George Washington Bridge. People were calling in bomb threats everywhere. The lunatics come out of the woodwork.
Mm-hmm.
They all have to be checked out. So it took me a while to get in. And by the time I got in, of course, the towers had fallen. And it was just, I'll never forget the first time I got down there, parked the car, turned a corner, and saw the pile. And that's what it was the pile. Mm-hmm. Now, people think those buildings fell and it was like, 20 feet high. That's 110 stories of two buildings falling in a 16-acre area that is the site, and other buildings coming down. It was stories high. I mean, to walk up, it was 6, 7, 8, 9 stories high of debris and metal. And it was just the most amazing thing to see so many people coming down. I saw cops that I worked with who were retired. They put on an old uniform shirt and a duplicate shield, and they're down there going through stuff. It was like, because this is what you do. It's what we do. It's for life.
Right.
And it was amazing to see how a little bit of order comes out of chaos. We figured out the bucket brigade. Somebody came, Home Depot must have donated a bajillion buckets. We had these orange and white buckets, and they had different purposes.
Yeah.
One was for body parts and one was for debris. And we were moving them off the line, and it was just a assembly line, a bucket brigade. And it was a lot of stuff being moved, but we couldn't move the big heavy metal, but we were doing what we could because those are the desperate hours, right? I got there, I don't know, 11, 12, whatever it was on Tuesday, the 11th. I remember didn't leave until Thursday morning. That was a Tuesday till Thursday morning because that's when people can be alive. So we're frantic. frantically digging. My unit is putting together cameras and microphones on drop-down cables and trying to drop them into void zones. So we're going under the pile. We have literally nothing to protect us from the debris and the smoke except painters' masks, which were useless. And nobody could keep them on, so we're throwing them away. So we all breathed in all the worst stuff, and people have died as a result since.
Yeah, and just also so people understand is the temperature of the pile within the pile because of the fuel, the jet fuel was running at like 1,200 degrees. So
yeah, jet fuel burns very hot, and there was a lot of building material, office equipment, all kinds of stuff that was flat, could burn, including 2,800 human bodies. So now all of that mixes together, asbestos, all of it, and as Tom said, it produces a smell that is unique. I've been to building fires all over the city, never smelt anything like that before or since. But I'm telling you, Tom, and I know you know this, everybody knows it. If you ever get a whiff of it again, it will bring you back there in a second.
And we had Chris Fields, who was the well-known firefighter carrying baby Bailey out of the Oklahoma City bombing. And he said that many years later, when they were cutting concrete to put in a pool, and it was drizzling, and the smell of the cutting concrete with the drizzle, because it was drizzling the day of the Oklahoma City bombing, that it brought him same thing. And it came out of left field, but that smell, exactly like you said, took him right back to that place. And just one other thing that I think that you had mentioned, Dan, just to give people too an idea of how it brings out the crazies, which always just baffles me of what people do, because some woman did, and I think she was dressed as a nurse, if I'm not mistaken, and said, "My husband is in there." And
I handled that.
Really?
Like,
I had to handle that. I got called off the pile. It was either the night of the 11th or the 12th. It might have been the 12th. Got called off the pile because my unit did a lot of phone work, sophisticated phone work with the phone companies and wiretapping and all kinds of stuff like that. And I got called off the pile and told, we got an emergency situation, got this situation. What happened is she was a nurse. Her estranged husband was a Port Authority police officer. Port Authority covered the airport and the World Trade Center and stuff. And they lost 37 members that day. Very brave people. She went to St. Vincent's Hospital, which was the main receiving center for any injured people from the World Trade Center. And it was basically like the Maytag repairman, because there was nobody. After a while, everybody was either dead or missing. And so she runs out through the emergency room out into the street where it's all blocked off with media and cop cars and ambulances and all kinds of police. And she runs out with her phone and she says, "My husband's calling me from under the pile. He's a Port Authority police officer. He's alive. He's under the pile." So what do you think that incites? It incites a massive effort to try to figure out where this phone is, where this guy is. Let's get equipment and resources there so we can dig and we can save this person, right? We want some hope.
Yeah.
After hours and hours and hours of nothing but bodies and parts and it looks like everybody's dead, we have some hope. So I grab her, a couple of my guys, we go up to the Verizon building not far away. It's a Verizon phone. Working with Verizon, talking with her. She says this, we got her phone. She says at one point, "Where's the bathroom? I just got to go to the bathroom." She runs to the bathroom, and about 5 minutes later, she's not back. 10 minutes later, she's not back. One of the guys that was with me that day, a guy named John Scazia. Scaz, if you're out there, really appreciate you. He was retired already. He's a detective. Guy was phenomenal. He comes up to me, he goes, "Murph, there's a problem." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Something's wrong with her." I said, "What? No." Because I didn't detect anything other than a lucid individual genuinely concerned about her husband. He said, "Something's wrong with her, Murph." I said, "Okay, I'll trust your instincts on this one." She doesn't come back from the bathroom. Where the heck is she? We got all her information. So after a period of time,
Do you still have her phone?
We had her phone.
Okay.
But we called her landline that she gave us.
That's right. Those were the days of the landline.
She lived in New Jersey, right through the tunnel. We called her phone at home and she answers. I go, "Hello?" She goes, "Hi."
Oh my God.
I said, "This is Sergeant Murphy. What are you doing home?" "Oh, I just wanted to come home." Now she's going off the deep end. Now we realize what a hoax it is, because as we're doing this, I've got a chief from my department standing by with the buildings department, construction people. Hundreds of people are on standby so we can, if we get a signal located at the
Right.
site by Verizon, they're going to dig there. All kinds of equipment, all kinds of people, and she's at home. So while this is coming on, while I'm talking to her, and I get told that the husband was located, he's an estranged husband, he's fine, she's nuts, don't listen to her.
Yep.
Okay,
Can't you arrest people like that?
story gets better.
Oh.
Well,
I was going to say, look, you just wasted a whole bunch of people. Let's handcuff
sorry.
you.
we're
Oh,
getting there with this woman.
Yeah.
So my job now, they're going to get an arrest warrant. The DA's office is notified. They're drafting an arrest warrant. They're sending it over to New Jersey authorities and to the police over there. And my job is keep her on the phone and keep her home. So for about the next half an hour, I'm on the phone with this woman talking about the weather, the Yankees, cooking, travel, whatever, anything. And she's talking to me as though we're just old friends having a cup of tea.
so nuts.
And I thought to myself, we all got duped. But as I'm on the phone with her, I hear her doorbell ring. And she goes, oh, somebody's at the door. I said, I'll hold. Go get it. Go
Yeah.
get it. She gets it. And of course, I hear, yeah, turn around. You're under arrest. And one of the detectives picks up the phone. I said, yeah, you got her. Thank you. This is me, whatever. They take her away. And the next morning, I remember the mayor, Giuliani, and the police commissioner, Kerrick, at a press conference, gave an appeal to the public. Stop doing this crap. We
Yeah.
don't have time. We don't have people. This is not funny. It's
Yeah.
not cute. It's not funny. And one of the reporters asks Bernie Kerrick, who was commissioner at the time, why did she do this? You know, and he just looks at her. Now, the guy himself with the mayor was down there when the buildings fell. He hasn't slept. He's trying to run his department. These guys have weighty issues, and he gets a question like that. He just turns to her and looks. He
It's
says,
the media. But it's the media. I
Yeah,
mean,
the media. He goes, she's a nut. No more questions. What else do you want?
Right.
I mean,
And
very succinctly summed it up. But yeah, we were dealing with that kind of stuff too. I know it's a long story, but
Oh,
That's
no,
cool.
well, that was a long week. I mean, for me, I spoke to a friend of mine that was with Cantor Fitzgerald, who everybody except the CEO, 2 days before. And then, you know, I tried to get a hold of this now, you know, his to be ex-wife, blah, blah, blah. And I'm in California, but it just, to have anybody to know people
Yes.
that you literally lost and just, you know, just had that conversation. But my problem is, this is going to be two sides here. People always now embrace, oh, it's 9/11, it's 9/11. And then they forget. We should never forget, especially now, what happened.
Mhm.
Because
no.
the first bombing, they should have taken that person, you know, the blind guy out. And I think he's still around, I think. But now, because Tig, I want you on the show.
Yes.
People tend to forget.
Yes.
Just telling you,
Okay.
I'm going to
Okay.
stalk you like I do everybody else, and you're on
Yes.
my Facebook.
Mhm.
Now people always, you know, oh, it's about 9/11, New York, blah, 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 Pentagon. But they forget about Benghazi. They forget that these have been planned against our country.
Mhm.
Period.
Our country needs to come together, but that's another soapbox I can go on. How did you guys get into doing the Gold Shields? How did you just say, we're going to do a podcast and we're going to get some pretty cool people on? I mean, the CIA guy, you get Tig, you get Jay Dobbins, but we had him on first, twice.
You did. Yep.
I think that legitimized me to you, Tom. You're like, oh, okay. You're not talking out of your ass. I do know these people.
Yes. Check.
In last December, Dan and I have a whole another part of us that we're doing with something that we came up that we can mention later, and we were trying to figure out how to, you know, get a platform out there. And I had said to Dan in December last year, "Hey, what about a podcast?" And he went, "Oh, all right. What are we doing though?" You know, so. We actually, you know what? We gave ourselves a lot of credit for doing this, because we were actually once we came up that we wanted to do it, then came trying to name it. Then came trying to figure out what we were going to do on it. And we took our time doing it. And we did a lot of research on a lot of podcasts and watched a lot and what we liked and what we didn't like and what we wanted to do and what we didn't want to do. And the concept of gold shields was something Danny and I both treasured, when we had them in our pocket and wore them. So the name Gold Shields was done pretty quick. We came up with that name rather quickly. And then, Dan always said, we need to change the narrative around in this country about the way people look at law enforcement.
Amen.
And the military. And Dan came up with, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to highlight these awesome people, these stories, these investigations, these missions, and get these stories out there the way we can. And luckily, Dan and I both with 50 years of experience had a pretty good network and had a contact list of many, many people. So we started just kind of going through, all right, let's try to figure out some big cases. And, and it just methodically kind of did it. And, we tell this story a lot. The show is very successful now. We're in our second season, but we had 7 shows lined up and that was it. And we didn't know what we were doing after the 7th. We're like, all right, we got 7. We'll do the 7 and then see where we're at.
I was going to take up juggling, anything, and
then it just rolled from there. And then you started having people reach out to us about wanting to be on the show. And we just, we do a lot of research with cases that we want to highlight and people we want to highlight. And we're blessed beyond belief of the guests that we have. And Dan and I say it all the time. We have this much to do with our show, that much. Our names, and we ask questions. Our guests are our entire show.
Yeah,
that's right.
We can relate to that. I
Yeah.
mean,
We've been so fortunate.
yeah,
We've been so fortunate, the people we've had on, and it's allowed us to meet and get a chance to know some people that just blow us away, and we become fans. We say this all the time. We're sitting there listening to somebody talk, and they'll have a natural stop, and it's a moment for a question or a comment, and the both of us look at each other. I don't even know what to say.
Yes.
I'm it's unprofessional as all get out, but I don't have.
No,
all I
not.
can say is
It's
thank
it's
you.
real.
Right. You were just talking about 9/11, and we had Will Jimeno on, who was one of the Port Authority cops who was trapped under the World Trade Center. Now, just echoing what Dan said of being just in awe of these people, Will started telling his story. Dan and I didn't say a word for an hour and 10 minutes. We just listened. And then at the end of it, Will was kind of done with the story, and the way he presented it was breathtaking, and it left you speechless. He finished, and you didn't know what to say. Like, what do you ask him? And I actually said to him on the show, Will, thank you for not taking a break in the middle of that story, because I had no idea what to even ask this man. I mean, what do you ask him? You're underneath 210-story buildings. What do you ask him? And that was a very memorable show because of just how he presented it and how Dan and I just took it all in and didn't know what to say.
We try to highlight not just exceptional bravery, but commitment. And we talk about the kind of people that we have on our show are the kind of people that they give everything that they have to what they do, everything.
Yes.
They leave nothing on the table. And they put themselves out there for their communities and for strangers, and they put themselves in harm's way, and they use all the skills they've ever even heard of to come to bear in some of these situations. And the resiliency and the bravery and the courage is the kind of thing that we want the public to see. These are not big newspaper stories. Maybe it'll be in it. Okay, cop gets involved in this. All right, and people go, oh wow, well, it's a cop. Well, he's a human being. Human being with a family, human being with friends and loved ones and concerns and fears, real ones, who can be afraid, who can be hurt, who can be killed, and whose life can end in a second. And we want to highlight exceptional people in exceptional situations because the public needs to know. The people that are patrolling, the people that are protecting you globally in the military are exceptional people. They don't have to be. They're not drafted. They went in there because they wanted to do it. The people that become police officers in this country and firefighters, you're not drafted. This is a voluntary commitment to service that takes so much from people and asks so little that they deserve respect, and their accomplishments sometimes are mind-blowing.
Yes.
No.
And I think you guys having that as being your, your mission is, and you think like, how simple is that? We just want to share a narrative about truth and then highlight these people, because you're right. They don't get the respect that they deserve. Christy and I last week had Ben and Jess Owen, and he enlisted after 9/11, like so many people did. And he lied to get enlisted. And I'm like, how many people would do that nowadays? And I don't want to go down that path, but people who run towards the danger over and over, and I said this again before we came on, is I also had watched Tig's episode this past week also. And when I usually see a podcast that's over 2 hours, I kind of go, ooh, pass. I couldn't stop listening to it because it was the same though. He just kept talking and you guys but you could see the picture of what he was saying. And for people who don't know, he survived Benghazi. And all I'm saying is, holy shit, you need to go see that episode. And that's why we want him on here, because everybody should hear his story. And it breaks my heart to hear how he feels so, slapped in the face by certain people. And that the rest of the country.
Let's see, Hillary, Schumer. Can I keep on going? Okay.
He actually said he wanted to punch Schiff in the face, and I was like, shit,
Schiff, that's right. Well, Schumer, Schiff did the same thing.
Yeah, whatever. And I was like, I'd pay money to see that. That could be a great fundraiser, I believe. So I think what you guys are doing is just, it's incredible. And I truly mean this. And Christy and I don't get behind things that we don't believe in, because if we didn't, we wouldn't want to have people on, and we're not going to support things, again, that we don't believe in. But everybody needs to listen to their podcast. This isn't them hearing stories second, third, and fourth hand. These are the people that are on the ground that lived this experience. Because I don't care when the media puts out a story that is about a police officer, the headline always sucks. It never really is about the story, and it makes people not really want to read it. It always has a little spin or a twist. Every once in a while, it'll be decent. But you guys highlighting them and giving them, and other heroes as well, the platform that they deserve. And I just feel it would open people's eyes. And that's what Christy and I want to do, is just like, hey, we want to talk about these topics that for some reason the media is so silent about human trafficking and child sex trafficking, when it is a massive problem. And we're talking to people who have been victims of it, who work on it daily. And we've learned so much, because, one thing I know for certain is I don't know everything about anything. But I know, especially in these sorts of things, I can always learn. I am not closed-minded to what the media says. And so that's kind of my little soapbox, is everybody just go listen to what the people who have lived the experience have done. And I do want to say an additional little thing on 9/11 with your podcast, and everybody do go listen to that one too, is what you guys said is so important. Is, the line from that is never forget, we'll always remember all of those things. And you were so right, because it should be on something every single day, because I 100% believe if you would have told the four of us and anyone that hears this show who are old enough to understand what was happening on 9/11, that 22 years later that our country would be where it is today, we would have all said, ain't no way that could possibly happen, because we were so united and supporting each other. And it's astonishing, and it's so hard to wrap your brain around, but it's also heartbreaking. But that's why when we see people like you and in the Tigs of the world, and the Ben and Jess Owens, and so many other people, the Jay Dobbins, the other people we get to talk to and that you all get to talk to, man, what a blessing you are. And I do believe there are more angels among us than there are bad people. I do in evil. I just don't think they get the spotlight as often as they should. And I'll step off my soapbox on that.
Well, and the whole thing is, when Kelly and I started this, we've completely pivoted, because for the first responders, the vets, the ABC agents, and you know, the Ben and Jess, and you know, people saying, you know, my life was shit, but now I'm going to do the best to give back.
Yep.
The mental health is, you know, yeah, companies, everybody talks about mental health, but they're full of shit because they don't do anything about it.
Right.
So, you know, and our whole, you know, we pivoted more to men's mental health because unfortunately we have women, when we've asked them to come on, they say no. Men, you know, we talk to you guys and you're just like, yeah, I'll be on, because we're about being vulnerable and sharing the story and allowing people to be able to see and listen just like yours and go,
Yeah.
wow, my shit's not that bad.
Mhm.
And this person say, you know, I might not know them, but this person's made my life better because of what they've done.
Mhm.
Even if you're a cop in New York, what they've done, what you all did, you took shit off the street. You
Yeah.
took care of that crap.
Literal.
So they wouldn't come into our lives. So they wouldn't sell the drugs. So they would beat up kids and, you know, go off and, you know, I can go on. But you know, you all did your research. Kelly and I just jumped off the cliff. Like,
Oh, yeah.
okay, whatever. We got a date. We're going to figure this out.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it's just start networking and saying, oh, well, we like what this person, you know, their background. And then shooting the email, hey, can we have a talk? And then you get to know them.
Mhm.
Right.
Because we've been completely blessed of the
Mhm.
people that we didn't know, and like you all, but now you're stuck with us.
Yeah.
You know?
Neener, neener, neener.
Yeah, you
But that's-
you build the relationships knowing that we have the same mindset
Mhm.
of what we want to see our world to be.
Right.
But we
And
start with
you
our
know what?
country.
We get, you know, the relationship we have with our guests are incredible. I mean, we stay in touch with them. They're part of our family now, because you have to, when you sit there, and Dan and I, obviously, like you two, you get an understanding of who your guest is going to be. But there's times that Dan and I have done a show and our guest has said something we had no idea about. None. And we're like, what? Like, holy crap. Like, you know,
Yes.
whatever they went through. And you have to, your relationship is so important, because when you have someone in front of you pouring their heart out to probably the most traumatic event that they went through in their lives, you
Yeah.
can't help but become bonded with them.
No.
Mhm.
Uh, And you know what,
Wait.
Dan, immediately springs to mind is Anthony Espada.
Yeah.
You know, we knew about that story with him saving the 4 girls in Cleveland that were kidnapped for 10 years. But then he went into what happened to him and why it was a trigger. And Dan and I knew nothing about that.
That's right.
Oh my God. Talk about
Anthony
blowing
Espada.
our minds.
Yeah, a phenomenal guy. You know,
Oh.
there's a common thread in everybody that we've had on our show, and it's this: it's humility.
Mhm.
The greatest people are the humblest people in many ways. The most accomplished people are the people who don't walk around all day telling you how wonderful I am.
Yeah.
They just,
Cool.
they
Also,
let their
their
actions
faith.
speak.
They share about their faith.
Yeah.
They share, you know, and that was surprising to us when it started showing up,
Yeah.
because the T in the Awesome Journey is a cross, and both of us are very faith-based. I mean, my pronouns Christian, hers
Love
is
it.
believer. You know, I'm always saying, you know, get out of your head, give it to God, and dance with your skeletons, because Jesus died for our sins.
That's
But
right.
Men.
what with us and with the two of you and with the two of us, I feel that what makes us our shows different, after each show, people are like, wow, I feel like I've known you guys forever, and I was just sitting around the campfire, or you know, in your living room, and wow, it's like you just bond. And it's just
Yeah.
not a bond. You just sort of like, okay, I know you. You're now I know you.
Yeah.
And that over not, you know, and I know that a lot of people go on that, you know, have the books or whatever, and they have their script, and they have to, you know, they say what they're usually saying. But with the Gold Shields and with the Awesome Journey, we want them to be just real.
Mhm.
You know, that's
it.
That's what we need in this world. Real.
Oh yeah. And we need to give platforms to people who are heroic and who stand out above, who give above and beyond in this life, and stop giving them to rap stars who write
Ugh.
ridiculous lyrics that put people down. Stop giving them to politicians who lie and steal. Give the platforms to the right people. Let's start focusing on people with decency, with honor, with integrity, with compassion for others, people who are doing God's work in this world. Let's let's put the light on them. That's who deserves it. And those are the role models we want our children and our children's children to pay attention to, not the knuckleheads we see in the media on a regular basis.
Well, and that's why the media
is sinking like the Titanic, right?
Well, but they're storytellers. You know, they've got a race for that headline, and they're storytellers.
It's not even true. Like, that's the part that's so hard to take. And my feeling on some of these people, I'm like, the sadness is you can watch some of these people and you're like, holy mackerel, you actually believe the bullshit that's coming out of your mouth, that you're reading off the script. Like, and that to me is shocking.
I will give 2 shout outs. And again, I don't really like the channel they're in, but I met the one during the Brian Terry events, Katie Pavlich and Harris Faulkner. Those 2 ladies, they're badasses. I guess I'm going to, because
we'll throw one more in there, Emily Campagno.
Oh yeah. Emily's
Yes.
Yes.
She's
So
the bomb.
how can we help you all besides you see it?
Now we can. There you go.
Shameless plug. Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
And their podcast.
Yes.
The good thing, even though you're seeing them, they don't move their hands like I do. So you can be just listening to them and you don't have to watch them. Like, what's Christy doing? Is she looking at a screen? Is she looking out her window?
Well, I'll tell you, ladies, if we could ask one thing, we would just like your audience to know, first of all, we want you guys to know how much we appreciate this opportunity. Thank you so much. It's been great getting to meet you guys. I know we're going to stay in touch because you guys are great. And we love your energy and what you're doing with your show. And we want everybody to listen to The Awesome Journey. And if you like The Awesome Journey, you might like Gold Shields.
No, they will.
Appreciate that. Second is Tom and I do have this secondary venture that we're involved in. And, it's part of our giving back. We want to help the men and women of law enforcement. And we came up with an alternative to pepper spray called Impact. And it's starting to get popular in a small way, in a grassroots way. Impact is not pepper spray. It is the same effects that you want without the ones you don't.
Oh.
No respiratory distress, no cross-contamination, no hitting anybody but the intended target, water-based, quick cleanup. It's fantastic stuff. Look it up. Carryimpact.com. Carryimpact.com. You can order it for your family members. My kids have it in their cars. If somebody comes up to you in an elevator, if you use pepper spray, you're a victim too. If you use our stuff, you walk away.
Well, I mean, I have my CCL, but having a gun in my purse, you got to pull out that gun. Having a pepper spray is easier to use. And there's a lot of states like New York, Chicago. Imagine that you cannot own a gun. And to have that pepper spray, knowing that, it's quick to get to use it.
Great points. First of all, if you're carrying a weapon for self-defense, it better be a life and death situation, or don't even take it out because you're going to get into a lot of trouble. Yeah. Secondly, our stuff
unless you're in Texas.
Yeah. But you got to be really, really careful. Law is very strict on that. And the repercussions can be severe. The second part of it is our stuff, people say pepper spray. It's a generic name for the product type, but we are not pepper. We are not OC. We are a different chemical composition that is completely legal in 50 states. Some places you can't buy pepper spray in.
Okay,
Some places
there's the thing that we didn't know about you guys, because here's what I think about a lot. And then I worry about, the senior communities, and particularly I'm in Arizona. So we have a huge senior community, Sun City, the Grand, et cetera, and that's where my parents live. And then I think about, and the crime has gone up significantly in these areas. And granted, they're designed to have, minimal ways in, and they're very circular, which I'm like, for seniors, that can be kind of mean because everything looks the same. But the whole point was to keep burglars out because you can't get in and out without being seen. And then they're too winding. But in any event,
Right.
a lot of elderly people don't want guns because they're afraid of them. And I'm like,
Right.
but you need something just
Yeah.
in case.
And this stuff, you know, the impact is great. And the other great component of it for the civilian world is it has a UV dye in it. So you can spray the person, get the hell out of there, which you should do anyway. And he can run down the street. The police respond. They can find him later.
kind
All
of
they
like
need is a
blowing up
blacklight.
money.
Yeah, blowing up the money.
Yeah.
Well-
exactly.
Kelly, we got it 2:30.
Yeah.
Another guest. Again, and we have had repeats.
Yes,
We
and I would
have
love
had
to,
repeats.
just because there's so many
Yeah.
things, truthfully, like when we talk about mental health, there's so many things I would love to get into that avenue with you guys. And just because you're super cool to talk to too. I mean, like we just said, you get to know people and they become immediate friends. And I'm just so grateful and honored. And in this final roundup, because I know we do have to run, but we don't want to, is you guys just final words. And again, we will include all the links and such that we've talked about in the comments as well as post promo. Tom.
Well, just thank you so much for this opportunity. We look forward to this for a long time. We set it up a while ago. We're thrilled to be here. And we love everything we're getting out of Gold Shields, the followers and all that. We just are so appreciative of it. And it's growing and we're getting to more people. So if you want to see us, you can go to thegoldshieldshow.com, which is our website. You can access Spotify from there, and our YouTube channel is youtube.com/@goldshields and see all our videos. And again, we're beyond blessed what has happened, the direction we're going in, and the message that we're getting out there. It means a lot to us, and we're just really, really thankful for it.
Yeah, I would echo what Tom said. Thank you guys so much. And I would also say we would love to come back. And I know that
I already have a date. I'm looking at it. So afterwards,
All
I'll tell you.
I know Tom is going to want to go into his scrapbooking on the next show because that's his passion.
Sure.
So
Love it.
we'll let him do that, right?
I'll show you some.
Well, we'll talk to you guys soon. Kelly, do you have your last little spiel?
I do. I mean, just thank you everyone for joining us. Again, we'll share all the links to all the things we talked about today. Do follow them. Go to their YouTube channel, like, subscribe, and share. Everyone needs to follow this, share this with your network. And again, you guys, thank you so much. We're so blessed to have you with us. It's a privilege. Thank you so much for your service and doing what you do every single day, and keep doing God's work because y'all are, and we're just so blessed. And until next week, Tuesday at 1:11 p.m. Eastern time, remember, we're all on this journey together, and together we do make it awesome. Have a great day.